It's a huge honor to be here, so thank you first and foremost. It's my picture, it's my name. And so I work at Khan Academy, and if you're like me, I didn't actually know much about Khan Academy until I kind of came across it. I stumbled across it through the internet, and the thing that I want to start with is the thing that grabbed my attention, which is their mission statement. And I actually put in orange so that you wouldn't miss it, the two parts that kind of provoked me the most, the idea that this is a not-for-profit, and that their goal was nothing short of a free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And I want you to kind of sit in my shoes. At the time I was, I'd gone through pediatric training, I'd done infectious disease training, I was working at the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, Georgia, doing vaccine research. So my head was definitely not in the education space. I was firmly in research and medicine. And I got to thinking about this mission statement. I thought this was pretty bold, pretty impressive. And I did what most kind of skeptical scientists would do, is I went on Google and I decided to search. And so I found that this was all kind of spearheaded by a guy named Salman Khan. This is Sal Khan. And he gives a TED Talk, which I watched, and I'll summarize the kind of the gist of the TED Talk for you now. If you've seen it, you'll see that this sounds familiar. But basically, Sal was in finance. He was a hedge fund manager. And he was living in the Northeast. He had a niece who was living in New Orleans. And he finds out at kind of family get-together that she's having trouble with math. And he's a hedge fund manager, so he does math, kind of applied math every single day. So he says, that's unfortunate. She's having so much trouble. Well, let me help her out. I'll give her some lessons over the phone. And so he decides to give her some tutorials over the phone, kind of gets on the phone with her, sets up these weekly meetings with her. And it works out okay for a little bit. And if you have nieces and nephews, you know that they probably have their own busy schedules that are not aligned with your schedule. And they were also an hour off in terms of time zones. And so it became hard, week after week to kind of set up these calls with her. And so a coworker of his said, what you should consider doing is using YouTube. At kind of outset, he thought, no, that doesn't make any sense. YouTube is for cats playing the piano, something like that. And so why would I put my math lessons on YouTube? That's just silly. And because of logistics, he said, all right, let me just give it a shot. Bought some equipment, about $100 for the tablet, a microphone, some software, and he made a little mini math video. And I have a screenshot of what that math video looked like. No frills, kind of just a math problem. He works through it, explains what it is. And if you have kids or if you're close to young folks, you may have come across Khan Academy, because this is usually how people know it, as a way for folks to get help with math. And so he set up these videos, made it authentic, engaging. Remember, this was for Nadia. This wasn't for the world. This was for his niece to kind of feel motivated and compelled to be more confident in math. And so he made it very personal, cracked corny little jokes, and made it engaging. And of course, on her end, she was watching these videos, could rewind, fast forward, do things over and over that she was having trouble with, or kind of speed forward if she wanted to as well. And so she began to know Uncle Sal as Video Sal, rather than as Sal, her uncle, the one living and in the flesh. And so she could pause Video Sal, she could play him over and over again if she needed to. And this idea was what Khan Academy kind of started out from, this collection of videos and exercises. So Sal started getting requests from other nieces and nephews that kind of wanted help with math again. Thought, why don't we create something like this? Kind of a knowledge framework or knowledge universe. And so he started setting this up. And each little round circle represents a cluster of videos, some questions. And what would be great about this is that some nieces and nephews could kind of jump in at the top if they didn't understand basic math. But others could jump in the middle. If they, let's say, understood geometry and needed help with geometry, they could go there. If they needed help with trigonometry, they could go there. So they kind of jump in and jump out wherever they needed to. So it was actually at the point of use is where they're getting the help. It's not like they had to start at one spot and kind of move forward. They could really capture all of the holes in their knowledge. If they didn't understand a concept well, they could go back to it. And if they were doing really well, they could kind of move forward at their own pace. And so it gets to this idea of making something people want. And there's actually a poster at Khan Academy that says this, and we all kind of use this as our mantra, make something people want. And this is an idea I'll come back to in just a few minutes. So today, what does Khan Academy look like? It looks very different. So it started with these kind of humble roots with videos and exercises, and that is baked into the core of our product. But now, if you go into Khan Academy, what you'll see is something like this. Basically a dashboard that's a bunch of gray boxes, and that represents what you get when you walk in. And then you take this pre-test, and it asks you a set of questions, and you answer the questions, and then it starts filling in, populating those boxes in terms of, are you a master? Is it dark blue? Or are you just kind of starting out? You don't really know that material that well. It's light blue. And what it'll do is it'll say, okay, this is what your dashboard looks like, so you can actually visualize it. It's all based on your data, your ability to answer questions. And it'll give you more questions. It'll say, okay, figure this out. Here's something you can rotate. You can look at different sides of it, answer. If you need help, you can actually go and you can see there's a little video where it says stuck, watch a video. And it'll refer you to something specific to you. And so if you're having trouble, it's going to be different than me having trouble. And you might go to this video, whereas I might go to another video. So it basically personalizes your flow through the material. It's not simply week 1, we all do this. Week 2, we all do this. Week 7, we ought to all be here. It's not like we're all moving in lockstep. The idea is that each individual is going to have certain gaps, certain strengths, and it plays to that. So at the end, it'll actually tell you, hey, for your time today, for your 20 minutes or 30 minutes of effort you put in today, this is what you accomplished. You got from light blue to dark blue in this domain. You got from gray to light blue in this other domain. You stayed at dark blue in this third domain. So you can actually see where your time is being spent, and you actually see the fruits of your labor. Your dashboard is what you want to always maintain. That's the idea. So it's not enough for you to have done well on a test 8 months ago. Do you still remember that information, and can you still use it today? That's what we care about. So to actually maintain that dark blue on that dashboard requires ongoing work. And if you think about it, that's actually pretty realistic. If I took a trigonometry class in high school and I did very well, does that mean I know trigonometry today? Probably not. And so there's a lot of stuff that we've all been certified for, classes we've taken, courses we've sat through. Even iMedia, even this summit, 3 months from now, are you going to remember the things that you learned here? Not unless you maintain those relationships. And so the idea is that you want a consistent, healthy ability to kind of go back and forth with your learning map and maintain it constantly, a continuing education. So students, individuals are completing tutorials. They're getting feedback and recommendations from the dashboard that says, hey, for you, we recommend this. For people like you, this has been most useful. And a really interesting thing started happening is that students started saying, you know what, I have a teacher, I have a grandfather, I have a parent who I'd like to sign on as my coach because I need to be held accountable to this and I want their help and assistance. And I want them to see how I'm doing. So we said, okay, great. So let's have you sign up with a coach. Your coach is someone that can kind of look in on you, see what you're doing, have access to your dashboard. And naturally, coaches in many settings became teachers. And so they would get, in a classroom setting, information from multiple students. So multiple students learning dashboard is kind of feeding into a coach. And that frees up what's happening in the classroom, right? Because now a teacher can have something like this. This is a teacher dashboard screenshot where they have names on one side of all the students. And across the top, they have all the domains, all the things that those students are working on. And you can, at a glance, say, oh, you know what? You're having trouble, but you understand it. So why don't you guys partner up together? And in fact, I may not even have to tell you that. You might be able to actually find one another. And you four, maybe we can work together as a group because you're struggling. And the rest of you are doing pretty well. Why don't you organize with another co-teacher over there around a game or an activity? So you start utilizing class time more effectively because now in the class you can do problem solving, hands-on projects, role-playing, games, all the things that you actually need people for, right? So in most situations in classrooms, it doesn't make sense to have 300 people quietly listening and one teacher trying to teach because then you're just trying to teach to some average and some people are bored, some people are feeling overwhelmed. Instead, what you can do is say, look, here's the analytics and the didactic piece. You can actually do that online. And let's free up the in-person time to do something that's much more interactive and get people involved. and make it more engaging and also applied. So you're actually trying to take all that skill that you learn online and see if you can actually apply it to a real world problem. Can you actually build a robot now that you've taken some engineering videos? Can you actually figure out what to do with a patient now that you watch some medicine videos? Whatever the scenario is, can you apply it? So that's what's happening in the classrooms. So these are the two use cases that we see most frequently. Individuals coming in, completing tutorials, getting feedback, and following recommendations at home, kind of as a supplement to what they get in the classroom. And then also in classrooms, a teacher will assign tutorials, follow student progress, and then design in-class activities that are much more interactive. So that's the exciting kind of use that we're seeing. And it's grown tremendously. So the scale is, about 200 countries, over 30,000 classrooms in the world. And this is 8 million. I actually double-checked last night to make sure that was accurate. It's actually around 9.9 million unique users per month that are coming in, and very close number of registered users on our site, and over 1.2 billion problems solved on the site. So it's an enormous scale, and it's used around the world for these purposes, primarily math, economics, finance, branching into art history, world history, and I do the health and medicine part. So I said I would come back to this idea of make something people want. So all this is happening. I'm at the CDC, and I come across this TED Talk, and I'm thinking, well, wait a second. I went through 4 years of medical school, residency, fellowship, did 2 years at CDC, and could it have been done better? Could it have been done more effectively? And a lot of my med school classmates, myself included, actually spent a lot of time outside of the classroom, looking things up on our own, reading things on our own, getting a medical education in many senses of the word on our own. And so we certainly had to be at the brick and mortar institution, but we were getting a lot of learning outside of the classroom. So could we add value to what's happening in the brick and mortar institutions? That's one of the fundamental questions in health and medicine today. And so I was thinking, how do we actually make something people want in that field, and how do we add value to how education is done in the medical space? So I started out kind of in the same vein as how Khan Academy started out. I started making videos. And so made a bunch of videos around basic things like the heart, understanding how the heart works. This is obviously relevant for physicians in training, but also nurses, dentists. It's also relevant for patients that might have problems with their heart and want to understand how it works. Started putting together questions and saying, okay, do people actually understand it? Are they really learning what I think that they should be learning? Getting text and saying, okay, it's not just my word that's going out there. Let's get the WHO's text. Let's get the CDC text. Let's make sure people get this message from different places. And people actually don't always like consuming one brand of content. They don't just want video. They also might want questions. They might want text. They might also want games. And so put games together. And this is actually a way of learning CPR. And so these are the 4 major buckets of content that we have. We have videos, questions, text, and games. And again, we have 9.9 million uniques that come to the site every month. And so it creates a huge spot for community building. So you can actually have questions and answers and percolate the best ones to the top. And you can learn a lot from that. In many ways, you can learn more from that than you can from the video itself, especially when that thread gets really long and deep. So these are the different brands of content that we have. And the number one question I always get is, when you make content for medicine or for anything, what's your target audience? How do you think about your audience? Would it be appropriate for me to make a video for a medical student if an 11-year-old is watching that? Does that make sense? And the way that we think about content, the way that we've come to think about content, is in a sense like a learning funnel. So at the top would be some basic bits of content addressing issues that are very straightforward. Things like, what does your heart do? What's the difference between an artery and a vein, for example. Things that are fairly generic, and anyone might have that question. You won't need a lot of kind of information built in to be able to ask that question. And then you ask more concrete questions or deeper questions, things like, how does blood get oxygen? How does heart muscle differ from skeletal muscle? It's a harder question to ask, and you would actually need some of that information up here to even ask that deeper question. And finally, get into really hard questions, things like, how do you read your EKG? Let's say you have an EKG, how would you be able to read it yourself? So if there's that learning funnel, what we do is we actually create content that's set up for, let's say, my grandmother, that says, what is your heart? Here it is in your chest. It's in your thorax. It's what we call this space. You have one heart, not two. Has 4 chambers. Real basic information. And that would be, let's say, 7 minutes. The next video might say, okay, now that you know you have 4 chambers, let's talk about the flow of blood through those 4 chambers. It goes this way. Great. Video 7 might say something like, okay, now that you've learned all that stuff, now let's talk about muscle contraction. This is how it works. And video 15 might say, now that you've had a heart attack, this is what actually happened. So you get a real deep, fundamental understanding of what that whole process is. You can jump in at any point. You can say, this is too complicated for me. Let me go over here. Oh, okay, here. This makes sense. Now let's go forward from here. And someone that's very, let's say, expert can come in and say, look, I just want this one piece of information, and I can jump in and jump out. So that's essentially how it's designed. Now, Khan Academy, then, is a lot of different kinds of things. And I want to kind of highlight some meta-level thoughts around our pedagogy, how we think about teaching and learning. It's free. It's online. A lot of people know that piece of it. There's this idea that you can jump in and jump out. And what I mean by that is, let's say you have a parent coming into a clinic, and that parent is not sure about the flu vaccine. Actually, flu season is upon us now, so this is a very timely topic. Flu vaccine, not sure whether it makes sense to get it. I've heard this or heard that. I got it last year, I got sick. Or I never get it, and I never get sick. Everyone has their own experience around flu vaccine. But let's say they want to make an informed decision. They want to learn about the facts. Do they want to take a 10-week course on flu vaccine or vaccines in general? Probably not. Do they want to read a flyer written by the CDC? Probably not. How are they going to get that information? They want it quick. They want it pithy. They want it in a language that they understand. They want real data, not just platitudes. And so that's what I mean when I say jump in and jump out. Offer that. Offer that piece of information. What I would tell a patient in my 6 minutes with them in the hospital setting, offer that online and say, look, this is what it is. It's substantiated by the CDC or the WHO or whoever, but this is the piece of information you need. You can get it when you need it, and then you can log out and never log back in again if you don't need to, but you have it there available when you need it. So kind of point of use. Personalized. And we talked about this idea before, but essentially my pathway through this content is going to be fundamentally different than another person's pathway through the content because I'm consuming it in a different order. I might revisit a topic over and over again because I just have a hard time with it. I might need to do it, let's say today and then also 6 months from now and a year from now. Each of us has a forgetting curve. We forget things, and it's very predictable. And so initially, I might need to be refreshed on that in a day. And I'll need to see it in a day later, and then I'm like, okay, I remember. And then now it's kind of reset so that curve is spread out a little bit. Now it's 3 days before I forget. So I can hit it up again in 3 days. And now it's about a week before I'll forget it, and I hit it in a week. And now it's about 3 months before I forget it because I've hit it so many times. But there's a forgetting curve. And so by personalizing it, you allow each person to kind of identify what it is that they care about and get that data right before they're going to forget it again. And you get to a point where you become essentially, in a sense, a master where it's so long before you forget it that it's kind of gone into long-term memory. And so there's this idea built into our system where we'll throw questions at you at a certain frequency based on the last time that you logged in and how you did on those questions the last time you logged in. So that's what I mean by personalized. It's data-driven. It takes in how you do on your questions and assessments and cooks that into our formula for what we would regard as mastery, what we would regard as practiced, and we give you different levels, and making that transparent. So you see, okay, exactly how many questions did you get right and wrong? How long did it take you to get it right and wrong? 7 seconds? 2 seconds? If you got it wrong and it only took you a second to get it wrong, maybe you're just moving too quick. If you got it wrong but it took you, let's say, a minute to get it wrong, maybe you actually don't understand that concept and you need to revisit something. So there's a lot of data cooked in for the user, also a lot of data for us. If I ask what I considered a fairly straightforward question, but 2/3 of the room got it wrong, maybe that question wasn't phrased correctly, or maybe the video explaining that wasn't as clear as I thought it could be. We also can get analytics around our videos. Are they as top-notch as we think they are? Which ones are getting the most learning as possible? So it's not just engagement, but are you actually learning? That's the metric we care about. You know, we talked about sales as being the metric in the marketing world. In the education space, it's really about learning. And so how do you measure learning? And we can do that through how many questions are you getting right a year from now, 6 months from now, a day from now, and what's driving that? Is it video use? Is it text use? Is it questions? What is driving that learning? Mastery-based, again, it's not simply a one and done that you took a course or you got a certificate and then you'll never have to see it again. The idea is that you continue to get peppered with questions as you go through, so you'll never really become done with something. You're always kind of challenged with that information. It's comprehensive. So, you know, let's say, for example, you take a class in something like genetics. You're a student, you're struggling, genetics seems challenging and hard. Is it because genetics is a problem for you? Or is it that you don't have a solid math basis and probability is part of genetics? You know, is that really the issue? And if that's the issue, there's nothing that's going to happen in that genetics course that's going to help you. We need to go back and revisit probability and math. And so those kinds of gaps get identified and can get plugged once you have a system that's comprehensive. The content we're generating right now for the MCAT is peer-reviewed, and I'll get into the MCAT in just a moment. But that means that essentially faculty are reviewing the content, making sure it's accurate. And this last point is probably the most important point, which is that it's engaging and fun. If you take a look on Google and try to type in anything, you'll find content around that. It'll probably be right. A lot of factual content is on, you know, it's on the internet. But it's not engaging and it's not fun. And so it's very hard to keep people's attention when the content is actually not that interesting. So we really think hard about how to make content interesting that's also deep. And that's the big challenge. It's very easy to make very fluffy content interesting. But if you're trying to go deep with information, how do you still maintain that engagement? And we've learned a lot of lessons through analytics, but also through our subjective experience going through that process. So the MCAT is the medical college admission test. It's something that I've been working on. And there's an important lesson that comes out of this, which is scaling. So I was making content myself. I was making videos, writing questions. It's a hard model to scale. Another option could be to go out and just reach for content, you know, go out into the world and say, hey, would you like to put your content on our platform? The problem there becomes brand dilution because you get content that isn't that good. And people start thinking, well, this isn't great the way that it used to be great. So how do you maintain high quality and still scale? What we did is we actually ran a national competition and had the best communicators essentially send us their product, their videos. We went through about 200 videos and found the top ones, trained them to make really great videos and questions, and we're rolling out content for the medical college admission test as we speak. So that this content is, again, it's free, it's available to anyone around the world, and it's getting cranked out at a pace that's much faster than what we were doing before because now we have 14 people making that content for us. So Khan Academy Medicine actually has now in excess of 2 million views or so across the world. It's primarily used by health students and patients and fundamentally used as a supplement or a resource. The feedback we're getting is tremendous. You know, these are just, I get probably about 10 or 15 of these, you know, a day, but I just dropped these in. These videos succinctly say what it took my class 3 weeks to go over, such a lifesaver for the NCLEX exam, which is a nursing exam. I'm a physician from Thailand, just found these from the other side of the world, thank you. And this last one's interesting. I'm a 13-year-old and I understand pressure volume loops, thanks Khan Academy. Pressure and volume loops are taught in the second year of medical school. I learned them when I was at UC San Francisco in my second year. It doesn't matter how old you are. If you can explain this stuff in a very clear way, and if someone's motivated, they can get there. And that's true of anyone. You know, some people say I'm too young for med school. Some people say I'm too old for med school. This stuff is accessible. And more we're seeing in clinics, patients are coming in armed with information. And so if we can make that information accessible and understandable, I think we're doing both sides of the table a huge service. We're trying to go international now, and we've done a very good job of it insofar as we've actually translated the entire website into Spanish. That launched in September. We're doing Portuguese next. This means analytics are in Spanish. The entire website, the data, the questions, the text, everything is translated into Spanish. And so it's a fully Spanish version of Khan Academy, and we're doing this for all the major languages. So once content gets on our site, it automatically gets translated. 2/3 of the world does not have internet access, and that statistic always shocks me. It's less and less day by day, but the fact that 2/3 of the world is still the number is a very large number. And so there's a product called Khan Academy Lite, which essentially allows you to download all of Khan Academy and run it off a local device. And you can stream video, essentially an intranet system. And we've got classrooms around the world using Khan Academy Lite to essentially teach content across our site. So I'll stop there. We have a few minutes for questions. But this is the basic idea is a world with health and medicine education free for all. Thank you. There's a question right there.
Hi, I'm Mike Dubin from MasterCard. First of all, I thought that was great. Question for you. What you're doing for the MCATs, are you also doing for SATs and other sort of high school AP stuff?
Yeah, so we are. So all the major exams that students take, one of the challenges is that SAT is not global. And so it's a challenge, but it's also an interesting play because if we create content for the SAT, and we have some, we can also repurpose that content in math, and we can repurpose that content in language arts. And so you can actually take that same content, mix and match it, and package it differently for different use cases. And say, look, here's that SAT content, but it's also GRE content. You know, some of that same stuff is going to come up again and again. So we do that. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Got one back here.
Tom Garrett from Universal Technical Institute. If you can figure out how to teach people to fix cars online, then I'm in deep trouble, so please don't do that. So we heard about studying for the medical school, nursing, GREs, all these high-level things. What about GEDs? Yesterday we heard that 30% of American kids don't graduate from high school. It seems to me that right there is a major, if you want to make the world better, that's where you could really make the world a lot better.
So our core product, where we put 99% of our effort, is in K through 12 education. So math education and STEM education in general is where we've put a lot of our effort on the platform side. So we have interesting questions coming up in chemistry, math, biology, physics. So you understand all those core STEM subjects that are very important. Actually, an important one that I haven't mentioned thus far is computer science. So we actually do allow you to kind of go in as a novice, having never programmed in your life, and immediately start learning how to program. And we've gotten a lot of accolades around our computer programming curriculum, which is a curriculum that's missing across the country in most classrooms. So that's an area we're putting tons of effort, and that's actually where we built, I would say, our brand. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Amanda with Golf Channel. Just wondering, you talked a little bit about, preparing people for all of those tests and, study guides and whatnot. That's a huge market from, just money-making market. What kind of pushback are you guys seeing, and how are you dealing with that being such a disruptor?
So the way that we kind of position ourselves is that we're a supplement, we're a resource. People can go to us to get help. The traditional sources that people have gone to, especially the for-profit sources that people have gone to, have been around for a long time. And they attract fantastic talent, and they're probably going to be around for a long time. One of the things that I see that group as is a place to learn. So we know folks in those industries very well, and they've been doing this for so long that they have a lot of lessons and a lot of false starts that we can learn from and say, look, we need to do this instead of that. This obviously doesn't work, this does. The big new thing is kind of this personalization. And that's something that everyone's kind of trying to get towards and move towards. And so it's, in many ways, a pretty open space, I would say. I think we're all kind of learning together in that place.
All right, we have two more questions. One over here.
Yeah.
James Herring with the Richards Group in Dallas. With free tuition, how do you fund your operation?
Yeah, so the major inputs of money have been philanthropy and grants. So we get grant funding for all the work that we do, and the social return on investment is huge, right? Because paying for one video is negligible compared to the thousands of people that will learn from that video. So it's a no-brainer in my mind that this makes sense, and a lot of our funders agree. Yeah.
Amy Bartle with La Quinta Inns and Suites. First of all, thank you for helping my daughter through college algebra, because it's hard to do long distance. But secondly, just getting a child through public education gets more and more painful. And those of you who have young children, you'll soon know what I'm talking about. What kind of traction are you getting, particularly from the teachers' associations in the United States, about this classroom help to actually customize what they're doing and get through a day more productively?
Yeah, there's a lot of misunderstanding about how to use this technology, and comments have been made today that I think are very illustrative. The idea that technology is not a salve, on our world's problems, but a part of the solution. We have what we call as the blended classroom, and the blended classroom essentially has features that include things like team teaching, having multiple teachers in a room. That could work in some settings. Having time to actually do some video-based lessons in the classroom, just a bit of time for that. Having a lot of time for interactive activities. So it's challenging for folks that have only taught in one way to then pivot and learn this new role that I think that they will essentially take on as they try to optimize the use of Khan Academy, but the role of a coach. And it's challenging, but it's a lot of fun, essentially, and we've been doing teacher trainings and workshops around how to do that, and it's been incredibly successful. I mean, the metrics speak for themselves in terms of how students do, how students perceive how they do, confidence. Groups that were marginalized and thought to be kind of tracked for low performance are sometimes the highest performers. I mean, it's remarkable how it's changing a lot of the ways that we think about teaching, and teachers are essentially leading that process. I mean, they're telling us what's working, what isn't working, and our job is to kind of take that message and try to disseminate it to others. But it's been very, very well taken up in places that have adopted Khan Academy.
All right, let's give Rishi a round of applause.
Thank you.